If you are an agency owner, this is a video for you on how to find untapped industries with high cash flow, right? So this is how you're going to basically create a really high ticket agency without really targeting the wrong industries. Now, if you're watching this video, maybe you've been in these shoes, maybe you're currently doing this, maybe you have done this in the past, but 90% of agencies out there today start really in digital marketing, web design, web development, ads, SEO, things of that nature. And as a result, they typically set themselves up in a pattern where they're not able to break out of that too easily, right? That's why I'm creating this video. I've seen this again and again with a lot of the consulting students that I do, and when they're trying to choose their niche or they're trying to actually choose which clients to be loyal to and double down the results, right? So basically, there is a couple of industries out there that we like to really avoid on a cold email level, as well as when we're starting out with other agency owners that, or maybe even freelancers, right? So some of them is like the real estate niche. Everybody, their mom, their grandma, everybody's in real estate, right? So you're competing with a lot of commoditized prices, and there is money to be made there. It's just very commoditized. And the whole point of business, at least in my philosophy, is to try to become like kind of like the game of Monopoly, right? You want to own everything on the board as much as you can and control as many factors as you can so that when you're growing, it's very consistent, it's very reliable, and you have a lot of assets to basically rely on. Another industry to kind of avoid is restaurants, local retail, fitness, and there's obviously a bunch of other industries out there. But one of the ones that we really like to stay away from, especially on the cold outbound level, is spaces like cybersecurity or like DevOps, where there's extremely trust based services and products, where essentially all of the fulfillment is really high tech, really high knowledgeable people that can't be really convinced out of their ways. And on top of that, you're dealing with very confidential data. So it's hard to create some type of asset that can be given forward without it seeming like, holy moly, we have a data leak, right? So with the wrong industry, you'll get like pretty low reply rates, and you'll like obviously be pitching lower because there's more people that are competing against you. And then with the right industry, you'll get pretty high reply rates because nobody else is pitching these types of offers, right? So the whole concept of finding untapped offers is really about literally what it sounds like, finding where nobody else is, right? So there's a couple of key factors to look for basically on this level. So first thing you want to find, regardless of the industry, is you need to make sure that you can actually ROI, return on investment, for your client pretty easily within your price tag, right? So if the average sale is $10,000 plus, maybe it's $50,000 plus or higher, that's pretty good. That's what we like to look for. We like to look for obviously long customer lifetime engagement of the clients that you bring as well, because then of course the LTV, the lifetime value, starts to increase and their ROI is a no-brainer, right? If you want to be paid the big bucks, you have to basically demonstrate that you can either give within a short time frame larger money amounts, or you can transform what they currently have and squeeze more out of the same limit, right? Next thing is like to look for growing industries where they're already cash flow positive. There's maybe consistent revenue streams, not consistently dependent on government or investor funding. These types of niches are typically fads and short term. You can kind of think of it like the COVID masks, even, right? They were very booming, but they were completely government funded at first, and then they entered the private sector. And as they started to really not be in need anymore, well, good luck getting an ROI, right? You have to create another pandemic. So you want to look for healthy margins within that, as of course a growing demand. You want to have other agencies basically not be in this space. So if you start researching them on Google, like you finding like type of industry with an agency attached, and there's nobody there, now you know you're onto a niche enough level where those pain points and those competitors are just not there, right? Another key indicator is if they're using really outdated marketing approaches compared to what today's marketing approach is, right? So this might be like roofers, right? A lot of roofers have either a website, but they don't really have a way to follow up with leads. Maybe they have a really bad CRM. There's things of that nature, right? they have low amounts of digital sophistication despite the high value, right? So you want to find those mixtures. The last one, of course, with the high ticket price tag is the ROI. We want to define that acquisition cost. You want to lower it. You want to define the current one as well and see what you have to operate within so that you can hit those KPIs. And then last but not least, the decision makers. So there's some decision makers, like, for example, in the medical field, that are simply really hard to reach because they always have, they're engaging with their patients. So dentists, for example, they're almost never on their phone during the day. They're on their computer, but they're not really checking their email, right? Maybe the office manager is instead, but sometimes they don't have decision-making power. So we don't like to go into that type of niche really either. Just a couple examples of like what we did find that works really well for some of our students as well as some other agencies that we're coaching. Industrial equipment, pretty high contract value, high need, very timing based, low amount of competition. People really don't really think, oh, like it's a cool niche or whatever, but you get your industrial equipment, margins are pretty high. You can deliver clear ROI. The need is pretty succinct, right? You're either choosing it or you're not. And in order to get something done, you probably need this type of equipment. Specialized manufacturing has a very similar vibe, as well as industrial automation. The competition levels within these are simply low. Environmental services are tricky sometimes because they really rely on trust, but environmental services in particular, you can really play the regulatory factor. I guess this is actually another pointer is you want to look for industries that have a high barrier to entry, but not high enough for you to not learn it within, let's say, a week or a month, right? So great places to look for is like what local laws were passed or what regulation changes were there that enable a new growing market, and environmental services as well as other compliance services work pretty well for that. And then B2B software, this one's probably more of a commoditized one with more like a medium engagement level. A lot of people pitch different things to softwares, but if you know how to get the specific data you need, you can still pitch pretty high deal sizes and a clear ROI in a very repeatable manner, right? So, like one of the reasons why like we really focused on industrial equipment, the deal size is high, digital sophistication amongst the construction guys is probably much lower than like a tech field, right? There's really no agencies. It typically is more independent contractors and independent resellers and stores, but there's no agencies really that really drive leads for these guys as much. They really rely on Facebook or Google or local flyers, right? So, and the decision makers typically are on LinkedIn. Sometimes the decision makers, you can get their email, you can call them up directly as well. They respond to cold calls really well. And here are just a couple of sub niches to target within there, right? So different types of niches. Pain points to address, you could basically dig into how they're mainly getting a lot of their leads through trade shows, sometimes places outside of digital, right? Completely, those types of niches are really, really focusing down. And they're just completely blue oceans, honestly. People don't really think, oh, yeah, let me now email everybody with a very personalized message. They think of, let me email with a template, and they do it once. They don't even follow up, right? So you want to look at like how they're engaging within a specific marketing channel as well, because that will allow you to completely outcompete, especially with cold email. Just to go really quickly through like a checklist, essentially, like an industry validation checklist. So you want to really go for those higher ticket sizes. You want to make sure they have a healthy margin so that your ROI actually comes true. Stable or growing market, right? That's probably one of the most important ones, I would say. But you can start really small. And there's a lot of other industry directories where you can find growing industries online, and that will allow you to really get out there faster. You don't really want to depend on government or external funding since that's more of like short-term plays. And then you want to have metrics typically available so that you can get that clear ROI, right? Ideally, there is not many agencies in the space. There's outdated marketing practices, right? They're going to trade shows, they're not following up. maybe they're following up once, but they don't know how to actually do sales. This is where you can help out as an agency. They have limited CRM setup, limited digital sophistication on automations or different types of workflows. And maybe they rely overly too much on Google and Facebook, right? And that's the only types of marketing channel that they really know. But people forget that Google and Facebook are there to really eat your lunch money, right? So you can help them with a completely different channel to expand. And one of the best ways to do that, of course, is cold email, right? So also you want to look for like very few industry thought leaders. If there's few industry thought leaders, you should definitely become an industry thought leader in that space so that you can become number one guy almost immediately once you create that content and make it really valuable and distribute it. And that's actually another way you can distribute, right, is through cold email. So, and then the last one, of course, is like the decision makers. They're active on professional platforms. There's sufficient data available for you to actually create a relevant message. Maybe there's specific industry events and publications and definable pain points that you can either research pretty well or ask other people in this space, right? And common mistakes to avoid. You don't want to be another agency in this space, right? So you don't want to just be another lead generation or another ad agency or another website design agency that focuses on everybody. You want to really choose your non-saturated markets. You also, of course, want to like target industries that are really kind of like almost ill-defined or they're newly defined, especially with the laws. You don't really want to choose industries with like a super high online presence. Typically, those spaces are filled with all the influencers that drive a lot of attention, but not a lot of results, right? Maybe they're missing online activity for budget availability. They're targeting maybe only like large enterprises. This one's hard because this one's like they're targeting the longer sales cycles and they're ignoring mid-market. So the quick money is typically, or quicker sales cycles are typically in mid-market. Large enterprises take months to years to close a giant deal because it affects so many people. So they have to check, legal, finance, operation. They have to really correlate across everything. And you don't want to typically wait for that. There's some other influencers that maybe have a great strategy for that. But based on our experience, mid-market is really where that 10 to 100 million range is pretty fast. You can still make your decent ROI within there and be happy as an agency guy as well, right? And the last really big point that I'll bring up here for common mistakes to avoid is limiting yourself to industries that you already know. Right? It's important to go outside of what you think because maybe right now you're in the average agency owner mindset. So one of the ways that you can really find out of the box industries is look at supply chains, right? You can look at supply chains of, even on this computer that you're watching this on or on a phone, there's probably a lot of plastic and metals that are pretty big transactions at scale that are going to be distributed from one place to another, right? That's just a couple examples right there of like how you can use industrial outreach to basically connect the dots of the supply chain. Now, for a quick action plan, I'm just going to skip over this industrial specialization. If you'd like to look into this, like this is more subjective to your niche, I would say. But the quick action plan, basically, you want to really identify what you like to do. You want to identify the potential industries using the framework that you define, right? And you really want to go for a lot of like what to look for as well as like what to avoid based on the conversation we were having earlier here. You want to select those primary target industries and always just test, right? Test before you fulfill. See if you can actually generate leads for this industry before you go out and sign a client. Because even then, you'll have something to give to the next client, right? Or to the next prospect. Join those industry groups, join those LinkedIn groups, find the pain points, find the current, if there are current industry professionals that are like influencers, definitely talk to them first. If there's not many, then become one, right? Leverage their knowledge into your platform, host a podcast, host a content session, and really start to prepare that outreach for distributing your content and becoming a thought leader. Build those target lists. Typically, you want to go for like your dream 100s within this when you're reaching out to your companies finally and testing out these different niches. You want to identify who's like the true decision maker. Sometimes it's not even the CEO. Maybe sometimes it's the director, right? Maybe sometimes it's the CEO of an operation, and the owner just simply doesn't even handle financial matters anymore, right? So remember that the niche, the riches are in the niches, right? And I think Hormozy says this as well a lot, and it's totally true. Like the moment you really dig deep into the supply chain, and you dig deep into like what your interests are, and as well as what maybe you have an unparalleled advantage in from researching or recent laws or recent events, you'll find that almost really nobody is in those spaces, and that allows you to really get easy results as well as sign clients easily because nobody's addressing their pain point. All right, so your agency's growth is directly tied basically to those points, right? So hopefully this video helps. I know this is a little bit vague, a little bit broader, but especially if you guys made it towards the end here, I dropped some real gems there that we've been using. So see you guys in the next one.